Hey, you all. Welcome y bienvenidos to this episode of the Cultural Capacity Podcast. This is your featured voices episode for the month of July. I'm so glad you're here. I am in the midst of traveling as I record this, so you might hear some background noise, but I cannot wait for you all to hear this conversation with a current K12 superintendent, Dr. Brent Comer. Not only is he a dear friend, he has so much wisdom and knowledge to share in this episode. So even if you are not in the world of K-12, I encourage you to listen, especially if you have a child in school. He is the type of inspirational thought leaders that we really need to be making a change in education. So without further ado, this is a conversation with Dr. Brent Comer. I am your hostess for this episode, Justine Gonzalez. And let's get compassionately curious together. Remember, you're hearing a brief intro, then we will hop right into this conversation with Dr. Comer. Remember, you can click in our show notes, any of the resources we have, as well as watch these interviews on our YouTube channel. So be sure you hit subscribe and receive the notifications over there if you prefer to live stream and see the interactions that we have at the Cultural Capacity Featured Voices guest table. All right, let's hop into it. Welcome to this episode of the Cultural Capacity Podcast, an Educator Aid Incorporated learning tool. We're so glad that you've joined us for this Featured Voices episode and the others that are to follow monthly. Dig in with your teams or by yourself as we sit down to the table and get to learn alongside some of the foremost thought leaders in the world in their respective professions, sectors, while also sharing deeply some of their personal lived experiences. Let's hop into this Featured Voices episode of the Cultural Capacity Podcast, where once a month we spend extended time sitting, having at the virtual table, having conversations with these incredible guests from all over, all different backgrounds, all different sectors from a professional lens. I hope that you learned something valuable, and if you do us a favor, pass the love along, tag us, and share the episode. Hit subscribe on your favorite platforms. Let's dive in together. Are you serving in a current K-12 education role or a K-12 education adjacent role like school nurse, social worker, counselor, etc.? If you are like me and you have always dreamed of writing some type of book, then I encourage you to check out the link in our resources. If you are a K-12 education professional or a K-12 education adjacent professional, please check out our current offer for anyone interested in writing a book. The link is in our show notes. Enjoy this episode. Hello. Welcome and bienvenidos to the Cultural Capacity Podcast. I'm so glad you're here. I'm your host, Justine Gonzalez, and this podcast is sponsored by Educator Aid Incorporated. You can visit educatoraid.com for more. Okay, we're going to dive right in, and I'm very, very excited for this episode because, as you know, we have been working to put together some featured voices, extended learning episodes. And what does that mean? Well, I think it's really powerful to learn through people's stories. You know, sometimes it would be hard to get out there and say, hey, I'm going to go network with a K-12 school superintendent and learn more about his job. But today in this interview, you get to learn about that job a little bit and the man behind it. So I want to introduce one of our guests that is going to be part of these extended version episodes. And he is here today with us, Dr. Brent Comer, and it's a doctor because he has a PhD. But I always want to start by naming one thing that I really admire about the guest who's in the guest seat. And before they talk a little bit about their themselves, and we have some questions. And one thing that I admire about you, Brent, is that you unapologetically
love others. I've seen this in action, not only in how you lead your school district, but I've seen this in action with the love and care that you have for your family, and especially with your wife, Pam. So I really admire that. And I've learned a lot from you about relationships. I'm getting emotional already. I need to stop.
I'm about to get emotional. That's the greatest compliment that I could ever get. It's all downhill from here.
That's my first thing. I just want to say, I really admire your ability to love others unapologetically and without conditions.
Well, thank you. And truly, my feelings towards you is beyond scope, right?
Oh, thank you.
Trusted colleague, huge amount of respect. And I feel like I've always learned more from you than what you've learned from me. So I'm always in debt to you, right? And the compliment, my goodness, I don't think I've ever got such a nice compliment. And that's reassuring, because I try to do that, right? Not only from my religious beliefs of that's my one command, right? That I'm supposed to love one another. And I feel like I do really good at that some days, and some days I struggle a little bit, but I'm trying. But it is great as always to talk with you. And if somebody can take anything from my story, then that adds to my legacy. And that's at 51, that's really important right now.
51.
I know, right? You were thinking like 50.
Yeah, at least 49. No.
Yeah, thank you.
So one of the cool things, I have known Brent for going on 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, I know, right?
I don't know, but I have gotten to do a lot of cool projects with you over the years, a lot of cool collaborations. But why don't you, because just so people know who they're having a conversation with at the table today, tell us just a little bit about yourself. Before we get into questions about your cultural origin story and some other specific segments we do on these episodes, why don't you just tell us in your own words, things that you want the audience to know about who you are as a husband, a father, a superintendent?
Yeah. First and foremost, the only thing that really matters is I'm married really well. Continue to be married to just the biggest blessing of my life, and truly a life partner. I married Wonder Woman, Justine. She is just so strong and amazing, and really cute too on top of that. So that
Hey, you know what? This is not
I know
podcast.
I know, I'll clean it up.
Let's just stop there, okay?
I apologize, but we've been very blessed. She and I together have raised 3 incredible kids. The twins this year, Grant and Kinley, they're off to college for the first time. So major shock for us. Grant's at Purdue doing great, studying agriculture, and Kinley's my teacher. So I got one. So she's studying elementary ed. And then we have a 12-year-old Gabby, who is, I've worked with thousands of children, Justine, and never have worked with one like my youngest daughter, who literally wakes up every morning. And this is not a joke. In her 12 years of existence, every morning is the same, with her eyes opening and basically summoning the rest of the world, just warning, I am awake now. World, I am awake. Wow. And be ready for me. So she is my she's something. She's really something. And then I've been so blessed I've never went to work. I've got to go to the mission field, I feel like, for my entire quote unquote professional career. I'm always thrown when people say, what do you do? And my wife, Pam, gets on to me all the time that I never introduced myself as superintendent. I still, in my mind, I'm a teacher. And I hope that's what people see in me, even though my title changes a little. Started my career in secondary at teaching social studies at Jennings County High School. And then thought that, man, the next progression is get my admin license. And I've had every admin job that you could possibly imagine, from dean of students, attendance officer, to assistant principals, elementary principal, high school principal, and now assistant superintendent, and then superintendent. So
consultant, you were consultant for a while. You're working on a book right now, so you've published your dissertation, so you're technically an author. And
that's going right up the charts on Amazon bestsellers, my dissertation. It's really fascinating. But no, and still too, and this really does tie into my culture story that I know we'll talk about later, but also amongst working in the education field, my family's from a very agricultural background, and I still get to I'm very blessed that I have the option of continuing to do that as well. So I get to mess with the cows and the cattle and do that every morning and get started with that. So
hang on, because we have listeners and subscribers all over the world, but a lot of listener base in North America. And for those of us, I live in the Chicago area, for those of us who are more urban based dwellers or suburbia across the United States, tell us what that typical morning looks like for you, because not only are you Dr. Comer, K12 superintendent of a school district, but when does your morning actually start? And what does that entail? Because for many of us listening, that might be like something we've never experienced or even thought about.
Yeah, I start my mornings every day with unconditional appreciation from another living being, because I know that throughout the day, I often don't get that because of my role and people don't agree with decisions or they want more. But every morning I usually start roughly 5 a.m., maybe a little earlier, maybe a little later, depending on how my back feels or whatever's going on. But myself, my father and brother-in-laws, we each feed a group of cattle every morning, and they're there and they don't care whether it's too cold or whether it's too rainy or too snowy or too hot or whatever. They are waiting for me every morning to be fed. And then of course you're on call 24/7 for calving and some other things. And it's really cool. I didn't appreciate it when I was younger. I just saw it as, this is why I can't play Little League, or this is why I can't do this, or this is why we don't go on vacations. And now I get the value in it, right? I get the value in, there's something, it's healing almost for me, that I know that these living entities are dependent upon me, and it doesn't matter what I've got going on.
And they love you without conditions.
Yeah. I think so, or I hope so, or at least
as long as
when they look at me, I feel like
they get their food and water.
Yeah, right. It's that first level of Maslow's hierarchy, right? I provide that for them every day. But I really think, in a weird way, that really has reflects on my professional career in education. You know, and that truly, I don't deserve it, I don't think, but I so appreciate the compliment of that unconditional love of others. I think that those of us that have been put in the passive leadership and then chosen to lead, I think so few really take that consideration of, for me, I can only speak for myself, I'm not making the choice to lead, I'm making the choice to love, right? And that choice to love is sometimes ugly in terms of it's messy. And love doesn't mean you receive accolades. Love doesn't mean you get trophies or superintendent of the year. Love means at the end of the day, you've provided care, you've done the right thing. And with children, right? I mean, you have to love them enough to keep them accountable. You have to love them enough to provide them with structure. And in a weird way, my children are now starting to believe this, the older ones, now that they're getting older, that discipline that Pam and I gave them, and there's difference, right, between discipline and punishment. Those are two totally different things. But that structure and discipline and high expectations, those were all out of love. Because if I didn't love them, because it was harder on Pam and I, you know, when she said no TV, that meant dad no TV of watching the Dodgers or the Reds play. Right. And that wasn't, we had that discussion a lot, like, I've done nothing wrong.
Why can't I watch?
Why can't I watch the Dodgers? And so.
Okay. Wow. So we just got right into it. And so let's kind of rewind a little bit though. And when I say rewind, we're going to go back in time. And we're going to dive into this first segment called Your Story is Your Power. I think story is powerful, and how we choose to tell our story with the world and what we choose to share has the ability to not only help heal and liberate others, but every time we do that, I see that as an act of healing and liberation for ourselves. Because you're able to say, yes, this happened to me, and also I healed from this, or yes, I did these things, and also I'm still just me. Those are like whether you're taught, like you kind of spoke to, whether it's the positive or negative, being willing and okay to just accept yourself as you are and know thyself. Because when we really know ourselves, then we know we can have the ability to make changes in our lives. We can have the ability to have more of an empty cup, so to speak, or a full cup to pour from to others, and be able to listen to them and be there for them. So I'm very passionate about learning bits and pieces throughout friendship, relationship, whether it's business partnerships, etc., of really getting to know people and what I call the cultural origin story. And Brent knows this about me, but for our listeners and subscribers, I know you also know this is a podcast about culture. So culture, so we all have common language, norms, beliefs, values, symbols, language. Language is not just hablo en español y también en inglés. It's not just how you speak. It's exactly what Brent was talking about, how you choose to show up and show love, how you communicate, how you meet your needs when you're in distress, all those things. And then we know even beyond those are such big components of culture. There's so much underneath just beliefs. There's so much just underneath norms. And I think so much is birthed in us from the time we're a young child. So in this segment, your story is your power. I'm going to ask you some targeted questions that pertain back to your upbringing and your life's journey thus far. And we'll see where the conversation takes us. So the first question I want to ask is, when you were growing up, what was one of your favorite meals, or the favorite meal that comes to mind, and why?
Oh yeah, favorite meal is hands down, which I apologize to any listeners because they're going to think this guy's even weirder than what we thought. Hands down, my favorite meal is my grandmother's liver and onions and fried potatoes. That's my all-time favorite. That's my birthday meal. That was the meal that you got when something really great happened. And she was such a wonderful, powerful leader, right? That each one of us had a favorite meal that she made sure we had. But yeah, that's the liver. And I know this sounds crazy, Justine. My wife, one of the coolest things my wife did before my grandmother passed, she spent a week with my grandmother learning how to make my favorite dishes the way my grandmother made my dishes. So Pam's liver and onions taste exactly like my grandmother's. Isn't that cool? Really, really cool.
I don't know if I knew that part of it. Maybe you have told me that. I mean, I knew that was your favorite because I remember thinking liver and onions.
Yeah, I know. It's not for everyone.
Now, let me not say that though, because my mother used to make liver and onions sometimes. I would just douse it in lots of ketchup though, as a kid. So I should probably like eat it or make it or order it as an adult.
Pam should make you some.
Oh, okay. So Pam, when I come sometime.
Yeah, I'll tell.
So that's interesting. So talking cultural origin story, and what a gift, right? That your wife learned how to make that for you, your favorite meal, and you still have that, not only with her, but that remembrance of those moments with your grandmother.
Right.
Talk to the listeners a little bit about what your grandma meant to you in your life. You said she was an incredible leader. Give us a little bit more meat as to how she impacted you and how that kind of really informed your leadership trajectory.
Yeah, I think I've been looking, I talk about this all the time. I had such a blessed childhood that and again, in the moment, you don't realize it, right? Because we didn't have a lot of money and we were farm kids and we didn't have all the bells and whistles and all those other things. But my goodness, Justine, looking back, we were just drowning in support and drowning in love and drowning in the biggest thing with my grandmother. And truly, if I had to pick one person that has molded my leadership style, which I hope would just molded the man that I want to be and the husband I want to be and the friend I want to be and the son I want to be, was her. And I think my siblings would say the same. I think she was that powerful, right? She was the men in my family were very, very, and are very strong-willed and very quick-tempered and very set in their beliefs. And my grandmother was this underlying quiet force that kept the continent from not splitting apart, right?
She was the iron fist wearing a velvet dress.
And people that knew her, that didn't know her as intimately as we that were so blessed to be raised by her, she's the strongest human being I think I've ever, I'm getting emotional just thinking of her, right? Of just that pure strength. And our family was based on love and based on our Christian beliefs, because my grandmother made sure of that. But really it was much more simple than that. Our family was based on unlimited forgiveness. Oof. Right? In terms of, and it was so cool, that is so trickled down. And I know my grandmother's seeing this in my mind, right? My assistant superintendent at the beginning of the year had all of us together, all the leaders of the district, and she made it very clear. With all the teachers in the district.
Shout out to his amazing
Jones.
assistant superintendent.
Best in the country.
Jessica Jones, who I've also gotten the pleasure of working with, which maybe she needs to have an episode on here. Okay, continue, Brent. Sorry, it's all about you right now. Sorry.
But no, she made sure we were talking about, our district is based on academic growth. Our district is based on growth, all this stuff. And then Jess chimed in and she said, and one of the fundamental unwavering parts of our district, it is based on forgiveness. We forgive mistakes. We forgive, we move on, we get better. Yeah. And I mean, in that moment, I was like, my grandmother's the superintendent. She right? But that,
she's still looking out for you through other people.
Yeah. And she was so based on that forgiveness quotient, because she knew forgiveness was key to growth. Yeah. And she was also big on, I know this sounds so contradictory, my grandmother found a weird sense of enjoyment in us failing. Not because the failure part of it, it was a moment that she could help us learn from that failure and move on and grow and forgive others sometimes when it wasn't our fault, but more importantly, forgive ourselves when it was our mistake or a poor choice or whatever.
And how great, would it be if we could all just give just a little bit more time to that each day. Yeah. And especially in the education sector. So as a reminder for listeners and subscribers tuning in, we have multiple guests lined up for our Featured Voices episodes from multiple sectors. Brent and I both happen to be lifelong K12 sector. And one of the things that I have noticed over time, and I saw it in myself, I still struggle with it at times, is we are very unforgiving and self-critical in our profession. And how much more successful could we model and be for our students if we adhered? One of my all-time life guidance quotes is from Nelson Mandela. I never lose and I never fail. I either win or I learn. And that has continued to stick with me on my own personal leadership journey, my own healing journey, because for so many years, we are expecting to be perfect, and we don't realize we're projecting that onto our students. So even if you never say to a student, you have to be perfect in my classroom, that is on repeat and replay in your head. Your energy is projecting that out, and you're expecting other people in your world to be perfect and never make mistakes, never. And so what you're saying, I think, is just so, so powerful. And sometimes we do, especially in our K-12 system in the United States, we make it about metrics and performance and all these things that essentially are arbitrary. Yeah. Because nobody's going to look back and go, oh yeah, I remember my score on the 4th grade standardized test. No, you're going to remember how your teacher and principals made you feel or did not feel. Yeah. That's it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And true, right? We talk about from a leadership standpoint, I know my time in this position will end. I hope it's not anytime soon, because I got some really cool stuff going on. But at some point it's going to end, and there won't be too long a period of time where people are going to forget that really cool budget that I designed in 2021. They're gonna forget the grants I filled out to get a literacy program. Right? But here's what I know they're not going to forget. They're not going to forget how that leader, one, in looking at current with just the pandemic behind us, that leader chose not to stoke fear in us but
Yeah.
tried to give us hope and calm, and was always transparent and was always honest. He also, I didn't like him sometimes in his decisions, but you know what? He never didn't support me, and he never didn't care about not only me as a teacher or an aide or a bus driver. And yeah, the little guy had really high expectations for us, but he cared enough to make sure we met those expectations, right? And truly, my coolest thing is, per my grandmother's lineage, I want to be known as, one time I really screwed up and he could have really belittled me. He could have fill in the blank, done this, or this, but instead he gave me the dad talk and said, okay, we can't do this again. And here's why we're not. But guess what? At the end, there was forgiveness and there was support from him of like, okay, let's get up off the ground. Let's move forward. Let's learn from this. Let's move on. And it's done. It's done and over.
Yeah. Whew. Well, okay. As we move into our next segment, Brent, first of all, thank you for sharing so vulnerably. I know sometimes when I ask questions that seem like kind of very surface level at first, people go, what do you mean? Why are you asking my favorite food when I was a kid or whatever, which, I've learned that from not only numerous mentors throughout my career, but my own studies and work in the realm of culture and cultural change management. And so one of the things that I've learned over time, though, is it often just requires a very simple question to connect with somebody. And if you feel led, or if and I know you have many stories like this, we're both connectors. But if you feel led to just go a little deeper, because all it was asking you your favorite meal. And then you opened up about who made that and what she meant to you. And so I think I just want to hit this point home really quick, because I know a lot of leaders listen to this podcast. Remember that even amidst your incredible agendas, your incredible professional development you're delivering, there is always time and space to begin with something personal and vulnerable, even if it's just the first 5 minutes of whoever you're talking with. And it doesn't even need to be deep like what we just talked about, but I like to start with a personal. And so that leads us into our frequently asked questions segment. And we're going to talk more about just the more professional lens. And I say this as a recovering workaholic. Okay. So as a recovering workaholic, we often get caught up with the duties of work. And I'm big on people remembering that we're not here on earth to work. We're here on earth to live. And yes, work is good and it helps support the life we design, but work doesn't have to be your end all be all. So with that being said, for frequently asked questions, because what I really hope to accomplish with these extended episodes of Featured Voices is that people who listen across multiple sectors, whether you're in education or you're in law enforcement or you're in politics or you're a CEO of Fortune 500, whoever you are, my hope is that people start to see people aren't silos, and we can learn a lot from one another across generations, across races, across ethnicities, across sectors, across professions. So in the frequently asked questions segment, I want to know, and I'm sure our listeners want to know, especially those not in K12, maybe some of those in K12, right, who have not been a superintendent yet. What are your most frequently asked questions as a K12 superintendent, Brent?
Yeah, that's dependent upon which way the wind is blowing.
Okay.
There's always a list, Justine, of, man, I wish these were questions I got to ask all the time. Like, what are you doing to help build help reduce illiteracy
you're like, oh yeah, that's my strategic goal. I can tell you.
Yeah. Right. I would love to be asked about our 3 big rocks of equity, mathematics, and literacy, but rarely do I. As the wind blew, and there was some strong winds in the last 2 or 3 years in our world, frequently asked questions is also dependent upon culture too, and the culture the leader not only establishes, but then fosters, right, and grows. We frequently ask questions relate to things like in the past, why or why not are you doing this pandemic related policy? Then we had the wins of, for example, CRT, and then we had wins of and in school world, it's typically questions you get from the frequently asked of like, I'm going to answer this, but I don't know why I'm wasting my time. Like, what do I think of the 5th grade volleyball coach? I don't know.
I feel like I haven't had time to think about that.
Yeah, I really haven't had time to think about that. But interestingly enough, I think those questions do truly relate back to culture. And this is a compliment of the highest proportions to the group that I'm blessed to lead. We have so focused on our culture first before we do anything else. In comparison to a lot of other districts, school districts in K12 world, not only just in our immediate region of the state, but I think all over the country, our culture has really helped dictate what questions we get a lot. Yes, I still get this question that I look at people like, really? This is that important to you?
Right.
But we haven't had a lot of the real crazy stuff that a lot of people, and I do think that's a reflection on our culture. And my leaders guide that, Justine.
They are. You have amazing team members
we do.
all across your district. And so I do want to give you a shout out so people also know this about you. And many listeners, you might know this too. I co-authored a book with Augie Amua in 2021 about retention. And Brent, I've had the pleasure of working alongside him in his districts through some cultural change management over the past 3 years. And when he took on this role of superintendent, previously serving as assistant superintendent in the same district. And one compliment I want to give you as well as your district is you have the highest retention rate for school staff, which is just, you look at all the news stories that continue now and that have existed for the past few years about teacher shortage, teacher retention, the great resignation, that's across all sectors. And so I do want to ask this I'm going to ask it as a frequently asked question because it's a topic I'm passionate about. I think it's heavily reliant on relationships and morale and understanding people. But you, even after the pandemic in 2021, you had no vacancies, correct?
That's accurate. We did have a few retirements.
Okay.
But we had no one leave just for the sake of leaving.
And you're actually attracting, this is what I find so fascinating about part of your context currently, is he is in a very small rural school district.
Yep.
And most people would automatically think, oh, limited resources, et cetera. There's a lot of assumptions made about that. The reality is you're actually attracting a lot of talent from Gen Z and millennial generation. And they're wanting to come to this rural school district because of the innovation, because of the commitment to students and the community. What would you say? What are those other factors? I've spewed off a couple because I know so much about your district, but what are a couple other reasons that you think you've had such a great retention rate the past couple of years, despite everything happening in the world?
I think, and it is really cool and interesting, right? Of those specific generations that you mentioned, like the Gen Z and the millennials, that's an interesting group, right? Because unlike my generation, by and large, they don't have brand loyalty in terms of not only community, but their whatever names on their shirt, right? They don't have that brand loyalty like a lot of us did growing up. I think it's cultural, Justine. I think truly one of the best, we've made some mistakes, but one of the things that we did really well was 3 years ago, we chose, even at the beginning of a pandemic, we made a conscious decision to not survive it, but to thrive it. Right. And again, I'm back to where we started. That's my grandmother, right? Comers don't survive anything. We find a way to thrive within lack of money, in farm world, drought, destruction of crop. The family will not continue to thrive no matter what's going on. That's our only option, is we choose to thrive. And the thrive ride is much more fun than the survive ride, I would argue, right? I think that cultural base, I also think it's not a surprise, right? To put it in a sports context, it's so funny. I hear people criticize like, well, that's not fair that all the good players want to go play on the Lakers for one team, and that makes it unfair. No, that's not a surprise, because guess what? It's no different in school culture or a law firm's culture or a tech giant culture.
Right.
Superstars want to work with superstars in a specific culture of thriving and growth and winning, right? You get to a point to where money matters, but it's not the most important.
Yeah.
Titles don't matter as much. Individual trophies don't matter as much. It's all about the we instead of me. And it's all about look at what we can do, and especially specific to those two generations that I know you and I talk about a lot because they were interested in them, right? Of learning from them, is this amazing skill that they have or strength that they have that individual isn't necessarily that important. It's more about how do I feel?
Yeah.
Do I feel like I matter? And there's this great book called Social Capital Quotient, right? That I read once. And it talks about that relationship piece, but within that relationship piece, maybe the thing that matters most is how do I feel about the organization to which I'm a part of?
That's right.
Right. And what's interesting is I think we complement each other just enough, but we don't over compliment, right? Like in our district, we don't give compliments for people meeting expectations, right? You do get major compliments when you went above and beyond and exceeded expectations. Like just this is my day started. This is really cool. And I got to mention this. My junior high principal, Miss Amanda Meg, who's fantastic.
Hey, Miss Meg.
Yeah, she sent me an email this morning just to let me know that my special needs teacher at the junior high, Miss Martin, who works in a self-contained area, and that's some pretty intense kids with some really intense challenges. There was a student that wasn't hers that was having a meltdown at the buses. Something happened and was wrong. Not only did she go and calm that student, she got on the bus and rode the entire bus route home, sitting next to that kid to make sure he was good to go, not only on the bus, but he got off at his house and all the troubles were done. And good. Now that's for a superintendent.
It's servant leadership.
It is servant leadership.
And
right?
I do know her, and I could see her doing that. So
yeah, right. I mean, that's the culture.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the culture of we and us. It's the culture of servant leadership. And it's that culture truly, I'm back to my grandma. It's a culture of forgiveness, right? Because one of the cool things about forgiving is I think you learn to appreciate forgiveness given to you so much more when it happens, right? And I've had this talk a lot, right? If I'm not careful, I'm self-abusive, right? In terms of no one can beat me up more than I can beat me up.
Yeah, and I think that's many of us. I think
right.
A lot of us in the human condition.
Yeah, I think so. And man, and that's been learning to forgive myself, right? Yeah. Even in a leadership role, right? Because no offense, I'm often in all my career, right? I've told you this story before. I always feel like I'm Forrest Gump getting on the school bus. Can't sit here, can't sit here, can't sit here. And then finally I heard that beautiful voice say, you can sit here if you want to, right? But it's that point of not being like everyone. I think in superintendent world, it's so unique. We superintendents or CEOs, right? It's okay to be self-forgiving. Yeah. It's okay to admit you made a bad choice.
You're human. You're human too.
Yeah. And what's interesting is I think that those that you lead, once you show you're practicing self-forgiveness, right? You're setting the tone. Because I don't know a lot, but one thing I do know, given time, any organization will take on the attributes of leader. Just give it time. That's all it takes is time. Yep. And norms are established because the leader models the norms, and then most follow the norms, good or bad. Yep. No pressure, right? No pressure.
Right. So this next segment we're going to move into as we close out our amazing time together. I want to say thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule.
This has been awesome. Thank you.
Connect and be so vulnerable with our listeners and just share a little bit about not only what you do, but really who you are. I think that many leaders could stand to learn from you, Dr. Comer. So
thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. So inner child, that's what our next segment is called, inner child. And I want you to think, I mean, I guess I could guess what it is because you kind of are, well, maybe not. Maybe it's different. Maybe something else different.
I may throw you.
Yeah. So let's look back. So I define little you, your younger self, as 10 years old or under.
Okay.
So for this segment, inner child, what is one key principle that you still live by now that you can trace back to little Brent? So at a point when you were 10 or younger, that you're like, yep, I lived by that principle when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And I still live by that now.
Yeah, I think the one that's glaring, and I think this probably won't surprise you because I think most people that know me know this. I'm either not smart enough to realize to stay on the ground once I've been whipped, right? Once I've had a whooping. I just continue to get back up and continue to fight the fight, right? I look back, and even before 10, I mean, I hear stories from my dad and grandmother when she was still living about, man, you were that kid that never would stop. You know, you would just keep going,
Wow.
no matter the failures and no matter the defeats. And sometimes I realized, okay, I need to change the game because I'm never going to win this, right? But I've just had, and not for this podcast, right? But man, I've had, like all of us, right? I've had major personal defeats. I've had major professional defeats that I think for some would have been game over moves. If it's something I'm really passionate about, and if I feel like God's leading me to a certain purpose, I don't stop. I just reassess. I get back up. Eventually, most bruises heal, most wounds heal, and you keep going. And at 51, right? I look back, and I know this sounds weird. I'm so appreciative of those major failures. I don't need to do them again. I hope I don't need to right. I don't want to do a lot of them again because it hurts and it was tough.
Well, and I think it was our dear friend Tammy Miller who says she uses this phrase a lot, and I'm not sure if it's hers or if she read it somewhere, but she says something to the effect of, it's hard to see the fire trucks coming when you're in the middle of the flames.
Yeah.
So so for you, those key principles would have been persistence and resilience, it sounds like.
Yeah.
I see that. I know that as your colleague. I do know that about you too. So, well, to close us out here, this final 5 minutes we have, I call this unapologetically living out my purpose. And basically that is you let yourself shine, Dr. Comer. Tell the listeners what you're working on now that you're excited about. It could be things in your district. It could be things personal. It could be anything, what you're working on right now. And then also, where can people find you to connect with you? So if they are on Twitter or LinkedIn or any of those things, or you have a website, anything, this is the time where we want to hear all that. So first though, what are some projects or goings on at your home or anything that you're excited to share about that you're working on?
Yeah, just some really, really cool things, exciting things. And in my world, in the scope of K12, right? We're doing something with literacy that I don't think anyone in the country is doing really with literacy in terms of a true K through 12 attack on the enemy of illiteracy in our area. Also very blessed to be part of something that I think is a redefinition of school, potentially, in terms of the shared course network that we're starting, which eliminates teacher shortage issues. It opens up course catalogs, not only for rural kids, but for a lot of kids. And please contact me here in a minute. I'll give you my information.
You do that. You partner actually with multiple districts.
Yeah.
We have designed that program, correct?
Yeah, we're in a unique partnership with 2 other districts, Shoals and Orleans, that neighbor us, doing that. But this is getting bigger quicker. I can see it as really, truly, I think it could be part of a redefinition of school, which I think we've needed a new definition for a long, long time. And I think that's really exciting to be. It's so much cooler being part of the writing team on that new definition than the one that just has to try to interpret it and fit it in. It's really, really cool. I'm also at a stage to where I'm getting to work with some projects and some future projects on people that, man, I'm just so excited and proud to work with, because yeah, they're talented individuals and they're talented in their fields, but man, they're just such amazing humans that I get to be around, and I'm humbled, and I feel so unworthy to be part of this group. You know, you're included, and Augie Mue is included, and some other, Tammy Miller we mentioned, and some others. That is just, it's just, I can't believe I'm here. Right? I kept hearing this voice, just wait.
Yes, you're the first client / partner. I usually call them partners, or my partner portfolio for Educator Aid, that we've really been able to dream up and constantly pivot and not have like, this is the plan and we have to do it. No, it's a plan. It's this concept of continuous improvement, and we're going to constantly pivot to meet the needs. But it's the first time too where I've seen you really lead in this way where it's like, no, we don't have to do what's always been done. And yeah, I'm going to bring all my strategic partners together, and we're going to align all of this, and we're going to work on messaging, and we're going to, so that's just been such an honor to partner with you in a professional lens,
cool.
because
thank you.
And to all the other partners, right? Because we've formed relationships because of you and your district. And I just think that when we start to approach it more in a holistic way, and also saying, like, Brent knows this, there's often times when I go, yeah, I don't know if I can do that, but I got a person. I think I got a resource, or like, never having that ego get in the way of like, yeah, just because Brent's talented and he can do it all, he doesn't need to do it all, and he shouldn't be doing it all. And same, you know, with any of us in leadership roles. And for the record, I think most of us are in leadership roles, especially in education. You are, because someone's always watching you, a little human, so you can never not lead. But let me get off that soapbox. Thank you for sharing some of your exciting things on the horizon. So if people are going, huh, I want more of Brent, this is awesome, I'm inspired, I'm motivated, or they just want to be nosy and be like, oh, does he tweet about his school? So what are the ways that if people want to connect or watch your journey, what are some ways that you're comfortable with people doing that?
I'm comfortable. There's a LinkedIn profile. There's also Twitter, Dr. Brent Comer on Twitter.
Okay.
That's probably, that's aging me a little. I'm comfortable with that, right? I've got 2 teenagers at home that are trying to get me more comfortable with other things, and friends like Justine and Augie that are trying to get me comfortable moving there. And of course, our website at mitchell.k12.in.us. You can directly message me there, and I do my best to get back to everyone. And truly, it's a point to your point, to kind of wrap things up. It is not about the individual, right? If I've learned, right, if I want to reach certain peaks on the mountain, I cannot climb them alone. But I can climb them standing on your shoulders, who's standing on Augie's shoulders, who's standing on Tammy's shoulders, right? And then we pull each other up. So yeah, if anyone's out there that has a great idea, I would love to meet you, and I would love, selfishly, I want to form that partnership, right? And back to our partnerships, I think one cool thing about our culture, and I'll make it quick, is we have a totally different view of partnerships within our organization. We don't have partnerships unless we know it's a 50-50, and I'm not talking about finances. We don't partner with anyone unless we know they are dependent upon us to grow and get better, and they know we are dependent on them.
A symbiotic.
A symbiotic
win, because when the partners win and the educators win, then the students and community win.
Exactly.
And when we make it too much about these two entities of the educators and the partners versus, but we're really coming together, it doesn't mean we're always going to agree on things. It doesn't mean we're always going to see eye to eye on strategy, whatever. But ultimately, when you're really all aligned in that values and mission way, and you're all on board with the vision, then it doesn't have to be about, oh, but I wanted to do it this way. No, it's, we're going to do it the way that kids need it, how they need it, when they need it, why they need it, and be responsive to that, not to our own egos. It has been a pleasure, my friend. I appreciate you so much. And listeners, subscribers, please share this. Share it with others who might find it meaningful. And please know that we have also linked Dr. Comer's contact details that he just mentioned. We have all those links that will be in the show notes when this goes live. So you can easily just click and follow him on Twitter or LinkedIn, however you prefer. And yeah, we look forward to our next featured voice episode. And let's continue to get compassionately curious together. Take care. Thank you so much for showing up for yourself, first and foremost, and for sitting down to have a conversation with us in this episode of the Cultural Capacity Podcast. I'm your host, Justine Gonzalez, and I encourage you to first and foremost check out our website, educatoraid.com, as well as any of the linked resources in the resource section of our show notes. And finally, be sure you hit subscribe on your preferred platform. For podcast preference, we stream on Audible, Amazon Prime, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Don't forget to give us a 5-star review when you're over there on those platforms. And then you can also click to subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is also in the resource section of our show notes. The reason why you would want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, number one, it is where we stream and premiere all of our featured voices interviews, which also include video, especially if you want to see, hear, interact with, and feel like you are sitting down a part of the conversation. I would always recommend that modality. However, it's also the place where we're going to continuously be releasing free high-level learning workshops for you and your team. So you're going to want to hit subscribe to the Educator Aid Incorporated official YouTube channel, as well as check out all of the resources that we put in the resource section of the show notes. Again, thank you for tuning into this episode of the Cultural Capacity Podcast. Let's continue to get compassionately curious together.